Hello, everyone. Welcome to the YCC panel. Got a mentor? Good. Now find a sponsor. Featuring Barbara Belmont, Dr. Marta Pineiro-Nunez, Dr. Denise Durham, and Dr. Dave Martin. My name is Christine Skaggs, and of course, I'm introducing the speakers of today's session. My colleague, Hannah Zimmerman, will moderate, and Jade Bing will provide technical support. Feel free to message any of us if you end up having any comments, questions, or concerns. I see you guys are already posting in Wahoo. You can also use the Q&A below or the chat feature in Zoom, and then the moderator will ask when it's appropriate. At the end of the session, you will see polling questions pop up in Wahoo. This is for all the sessions, so if you haven't been filling them out, we really appreciate if you could go back and do that. That way we can make sure we're providing relevant materials. So I'll just go ahead and let you guys start off since we have a pretty big panel here. If you could do introductions, who you are, what you do, and maybe a fact about yourself. We can start with Barbara and then Marta, then Denise, then Dave.
Barbara Belmont, pronouns are she, her. I'm faculty at California State University, Dominguez Hills, teaching analytical chemistry. And I just retired from almost 40 years of running a commercial lab, doing mercenary analytical chemical analysis.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marta Pineiro-Nunez. I work at Eli Lilly and Company. I'm responsible for the Talent Development Academy, which focuses on talent acquisition, talent development, talent leveraging. So my expertise, particularly, I'm focused on early career scientists and their experience at Lilly. I have been with the company for 24 years, and I'm native of Spain, the northwest part of Spain called Galicia. Highly recommended.
I am a senior director for the wine group. It's a wine collaborative where we make the top wine in the world, which is called Franzia. So I believe most of you are probably familiar with that. I've been in the food and beverage industry for about 28 years, and I have created products using my chemistry background for years, coming up with products for both beverage and food stuffs across the way. Thank you.
Great. My name is Dave Martin. I am the Associate Director of Platform Sciences at Blacksmith Medicines. So what we do is we try to find new therapeutics targeting metalloenzymes, and we do that using a fragment-based approach, so using a small library of metal binding fragments and then elaborating those molecules. And so I'm really in charge of that process, how we go from initial screening and then grow up into bigger molecules as we then hand it off into the clinical process.
Okay, and I'll just check in. Hannah, are you good to moderate?
Yeah, I should be. If I run away when my camera turns off, Christine, you're in charge.
All right.
But first, I have a few softball questions to get the conversation started. And we also have a ton in the Wahoo chat, so that's awesome. But just all of you have such different career paths, which I think is really incredible. So in that area, you've had to have had mentors. Could we kind of just go around a little bit and talk about how some mentors have impacted your careers? I'll
Should we go the same order?
Yeah, same order, or Marta, you can start us off. You're first on my screen.
Sure, I'll start off. It would be helpful if you actually called names, because otherwise we're all going to be very polite and waiting. Yeah, so definitely mentorship is something that actually as a mentee, I came very, very late to the game of mentorship, realizing its importance. I used to actually confuse the term of supervisor with mentor, which wasn't the case. It took me several years. I do work quite a bit on mentorship now that I am, that it is part of my job, and its importance cannot be exaggerated. I did not benefit from mentors early in my career. A lot of what I learned was trial and error. And it's definitely something that young people, I recommend to all my young people in my programs to, we actually do a deliberate mentorship. We have a deliberate mentorship work stream to ensure that people don't take 2 decades to learn the things that it took me 2 decades to learn.
Yeah, Dave, if you want to go next.
Sure. I probably wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am without my mentors. It all really started, actually, I was just, and this is often the case, it was just a bit of really good luck where my freshman chemistry professor, he runs a research lab, but he doesn't use graduate students. He only uses undergraduates, Rob LaDuca at Michigan State University. And so I was given the opportunity starting second semester freshman year to go into a lab and be overseen by a professor who wanted nothing more than to teach undergraduates how to work in the lab. And so that just put me ahead for the rest of my entire career because I had already had some publications before I even started applying to graduate school. And so it just set me off on such an easier path. And then I get to graduate school, and the postdoc that I got put under is also someone who is just very interested in teaching. He's now a professor here at Point Loma Nazarene University. And I just happened to luck out that the lab I joined had him. And so I've been lucky to find people that are already interested in being mentors. And so I'm just very fortunate to have run into that.
Barbara?
Well, they hadn't invented mentors back in my day. Really, there was a lot of trial and error. I could say that there was one very influential person who hired me. And then that person went and started their own lab, and I followed. And that's the lab I just closed down 40 years later. Her style of mentoring was like, oh, you're smart, you can figure this out. So I didn't really have anyone to teach me anything. I really just had someone who set these expectations that I would figure it out. And coupled that with the way I was raised, you can do anything. Because when you have to, you can. So that was my grandmother saying, there were so many things that needed to get done that nobody knew how to do that, you just had to figure it out. So having had no formal mentors or mentoring training, I'm really conscious of that now when I see young people. And I try to put myself in an accessible space so that if somebody wants an informal mentor, they know that they can use me. But I'm with Marta here in that I really had to figure it out for myself, and things are so different now. So that's my mentoring story.
I think that's great. It's one of the reasons that
we're being very honest. You can see that.
That's great. This is a reason why this is a big topic of discussion, is because people don't understand that this is what you need. So Denise, we'll go ahead and finish this question with you.
Yes. So I come from probably a little slightly different perspective. Being a person of color, one of the things I remember in college, I thought that my options, being a chemistry major, were very limited. And my career is based on the mentorship of my guidance counselor in college, really helping me to explore different avenues and different careers in which I can take my chemistry to the next level. And then on top of that, when I got my first job in the food industry, I was actually given a person to mentor me purposely, being put in a program where I was given information and a pathway not to make the same mistakes as some of the people that came before me. And to this day, I remember those things. And to this day, I live by those codes. And I try to coach and mentor my direct reports and my indirect reports, or want to and able to mentor those guiding principles to them as well. So it's very value added.
Yeah, that's great. I think this kind of leads into my next question is all of you were selected for this panel for very unique reasons. Barbara, you said that you specifically know, or I guess you have special interest in mentoring people in the LGBTQ community. Marta, you are in charge of like the young talent development program at Lilly. Dave, you're Hannah's mentor and close confidant from what I hear. And Denise, you were the first mentor in our Indiana local section mentorship program. And so can you all kind of talk about why do you mentor? And maybe we'll go ahead and start off with Barbara this time.
All right. Well, when I was coming out, I was about, I don't know, maybe 25 and just really trying to figure out, well, actually it was earlier, 21. I was trying to figure out who I was. I didn't see anybody in the world that looked like me or acted like me. And I was pretty lonely. So when I finally did come out and I found the LGBT community and did what people do, started hanging out with the people who were supposed to be like me, I found that I had nothing in common with these people, nothing, because I was a scientist and they were not. And so I learned really early on that I would really rather hang out with a room full of scientists who are not LGBT than to hang out with LGBT people who are not scientists, because I have seemingly more in common. So in realizing that, and then in sort of, growing up and, becoming my full potential, as I got involved with my professional society, the National Organization for Gay and Lesbian Scientists and Technical Professionals, now known as Out to Innovate. So we're just going to call it Out to Innovate now. There were a lot of young people who had the same experience that I did. And so one of the things that we've been working on is providing role models and connections between young people and experienced people to mentor them, to help them navigate through that kind of loneliness that we experience and trying to figure out who we are and meshing that with our professional career. So we've had a mentoring program for almost 15 years now. And some of that is informal and some of that is formal through an intentional portal where, we get people connected with each other based on mutual interests and interests in training and also interest in guiding navigating through the issues that young adults often have to navigate as they're, making their transitions from college student to adulting. So I would say that my role of mentor has been mostly an informal one. And when someone needs to talk, they talk with me. And when they need to fly, they fly. So I don't have that formal kind of thing. But I have been involved in our mentoring portal and done some intentional 9-week guided mentoring where, we're talking about specific topics. So that's kind of that in a nutshell, but really what it comes down to is what drove me to want to reach out to people was the absence of mentors in my life as I was trying to, break out of my shell.
Yeah, I know you keep saying informal mentorship, but sometimes that's the most important kind, is just being able to have somebody that you can come up to when you have questions. I know that I also have mentors like that. I don't necessarily meet with them regularly. They may not be affiliated with any sort of career or anything like that, but sometimes it's just that person you can go up to and just say, I am really stuck, is really the most valuable kind of mentor. So yeah. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, so, Barbara, you talked about being motivated by the absence of mentors. I think I'm the opposite. I'm very motivated by the fact that I realize that I'm only here because of them. And I think if if lots of people are honest with themselves, you know, a lot of our success is through the success of the people around us and not necessarily us individually. And so that really drives me. And I know that my success is because of other people. So I view it as my responsibility to do that for other people as they're coming up. Not to mention, we're just all just better if everyone can reach their potential. Like, there's so much out there, and to be able to open people's eyes to what you can really do is incredibly valuable. I also just have always liked teaching. When I was in undergraduate and graduate school, you know, I enjoyed TAing, but then I moved on to industry where we're not quite as open about things, perhaps. But I really love that mentoring is at least an opportunity to kind of get back into that and be able to see someone reach their potential. It's a really rewarding thing to be part of.
Yeah, I think that definitely starting to get mentors within industry is becoming more popular. I know when I did my internship, that was definitely something that was pushed. They were matching people, and I thought that was so valuable, especially you come in, you may have 4 months, and you really have to make the most out of that time, and having that medium facilitated for you made it a lot easier than me having to basically, you know, cold IM people, you know, in the technical age instead of cold call. So it definitely was useful. So how about you, Marta?
So there's a lot of valuable information, I mean, comments that I heard, and I keep nodding my head, and it's to show agreement. I think that so either we're motivated by the absence of the presence. I think all of us have something very, very common, and this something that resonated with me that the other panelists mentioned, the loneliness. So I don't want, I mean, for me, I think it is, there's two pieces. There's the part of my brain, a little bit more maybe rational, where I do not want to see lost potential. Having everybody reach their full potential, exactly what you just mentioned, is a very much a goal-oriented. It makes sense as an investor, as a company steward. People are the assets of the company. I don't want to see anybody wasting their potential one day. The other part is the empathy, the piece of me that sees myself in all of these young people. And I think Barbara said something very important, that is, okay, you join a group, the labels are a dual side sword, right? In that a label sometimes doesn't contain you. You join a group because you are this or you are that, or you are Latina, and then you end up not resonating. I think the mutual interests that she mentioned are the most important thing for finding, and this is what you experienced, Christine, when you came to join our program, that I started this matching process deliberately as part of the business, the way that we go about getting our interns to full capacity. And we did the matching based on interests, as opposed to you have given the same degree. I think matching interests is what brings people together more in the most powerful way. And to me, mentoring is just because I lack the mentors, I want to see that acceleration. I think it makes sense. It is a lot of fun, and it provides an incredible amount of, so my empathy makes me experience the loneliness that others are that I want to avoid, but then I see immediately the value you can see when you have a mentoring program, how immediately you get the rewards. Is one of those things that you can see effects, a cause and effect. And one of the pieces that I'm super passionate about is that I try every time that we get our brand new employees, they immediately start involving themselves as mentors to the next batch. These are skills. You have to develop that muscle. So I think that teaching young scientists this concept of servant leadership. In the past, you grew your career by being ruthless or by stepping on top of others. I think that that's not sustainable. So you build your career on, and I think that is what Dave said, on other people's success are always going to reflect on all of us positively. So let's multiply, let's be a multiplier, and let's make sure that the new generations start mentoring on day one, not only being mentees, but being mentors. I think it is just part of a good, healthy ecosystem. Kind of like the next generation workplace needs to have these relationships be productive. And God knows what we can achieve as a society or as a community if this is just part of the way that we are.
Yeah, I think you said a couple of interesting things I'd like to touch on. The first, having mentorship early in the career. I get a lot of young people that think that they're not really qualified to give advice to people. And it's kind of like, well, even as a graduate student or an undergraduate student, there's always going to be someone that you could more or less pay it forward to. And I think that's a really important thing, as you mentioned, that people are doing. The second thing was talking about wasting potential. We just had a webinar with Dr. Luffer Atlas from Lilly, and she said that, you know, this is one of the big things is upper management is constantly talking about the people who are coming in and making sure that all of the new recruits are meeting full potentials. And this is somehow sometimes how sponsorship is born, is by upper management recognizing that potential and conveying that with each other, and someone's going to pick that up, and that's really how an opportunity is born. So I think you said a lot of great things there. We're also seeing in the comments that people like pairing mentors with people who have similar interests, and, you know, just being aware of the successes of people around us. Yeah, definitely everyone. Denise, if you want to go ahead and finish us off for this one.
Yes, so to me, mentoring and being a mentor and a mentee, it's a good relationship. It's part of having a safe space, aside from friends and family that you could rely on to hopefully look at things and put your best interests in play. I think that's important to have that additional outlet, especially when you're trying to figure out things for yourself, and to have that safe space. I think it will help you to really look at things holistically. So selfishly, it brings me pleasure to be able to provide guidance and assurance to those that need it, and to help them, to guide them through difficult times, or to make tough decisions that they may need to make with their careers or their education. So I kind of do it not only for them, but I also do it for me, because I find that it's very gratifying. And so in addition to everything else that's been said on in regards to responding to this question, I feel that that's an additional thing that I'd like to point out. Thank you.
I'm going to start picking on the comments then, because I think it goes really in line with what you're saying here about having people outside of your family. This brings into someone really important, your advisor, your PI, your direct supervisor. Can they be an effective mentor since they are directly linked to you in your success in some ways? Denise, do you have any comments on that?
So I like to take that one. So don't be, so what my advice would be, there was something that Denise just said that is incredibly important, and there is a two-way street, that she gets satisfaction out of the mentorship. I always think absolutely it needs to be a two-way street. The mentor benefits from the relationship just as much or more than the mentee. So if you are in a relationship with an individual that is supposedly giving you advice, older than you, etc., and you don't get that feeling that that person has a two-way connection with you, that's not a mentor. It can be an advisor, it can be your PI, but don't expect, I mean, I was very naive expecting that everybody that was in a point of authority over me was going to magically turn into a mentor, and that's not the case. The mentorship relationship is different. So sometimes your PI is your mentor, sometimes it's not. Sometimes your PI is your, I guess, the person that squeezes the lemon juice out of you. And those relationships exist, and there's nothing, you know, sometimes that's kind of how it is. But don't be naive expecting that anyone that you have a relationship with will turn into a mentor. You get to say who your mentor is. And that relationship, that's a connection that occurs, because a true mentor will gain from the relationship just as much as you, as the mentee. And you can feel that. If there's that kind of an energy of, what is it called, reciprocity, then yes, go ahead, put the crown of mentor on a person. Otherwise, you may be lucky enough that your PI is a mentor, and that occurs, but oftentimes there's a conflict of interest, because a PI will be actually very reluctant to let you go, a PI, even if you're ready, a PI will be very interested in working you to the bone. A PI might not be very interested in having you be incredibly happy and balanced, etc., because, people are selfish, and that's just the way for many graduate students. Your PI will be actually a very feared individual. And that's okay. Then where do you find those other mentors and those other sponsors that help you through that situation? And, you have to be kind of at the same time, I think, very realistic, and at the same time, want more out of the relationship. Mentorship is needed, but don't necessarily give that title to just everybody. Also, be proactive finding the mentor, but not everybody deserves to be called your mentor. I'm not sure. I'm hoping I'm making sense.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying here, and this is actually how I originally got my first mentor at IUPUI. Is I worked for a new boss, and he's very reserved, and so the female faculty there, she saw that I was a bit more rambunctious maybe than what he had probably signed on for, and that's how she really started getting involved with me. Of course, I was very lucky by the end of my PhD to be able to call him a mentor as well, but I think that what you're saying, and people are resonating with this in the comment, that not all advisors, PIs, supervisors are necessarily going to be mentors.
And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. People should look for that person that has the mutual interests that Barbara talked about. And some of us, I think, maybe end up having more mentees than we have time for, just because we put ourselves out there to do that role and serve as that person that you can have a conversation with. And some people have few of them. But I think all of us need that aspect, professional aspect that didn't used to be, I guess, those of us that have been around, that was not something that we looked for because we didn't think it was necessary.
Yeah, and it sounds like not everybody necessarily wants a supervisor to be a mentor. You don't want to be spilling your guts necessarily to your boss all the time. That's kind of reserved for somebody else who can give you an outside perspective. Does anyone else have something they want to add to the discussion? You can feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I can start calling on people.
I wanted to add that, when I was in my first job, my direct supervisor was no mentor. All he did was goal set and perhaps train me to do what he wanted me to do, and that's not necessarily mentoring. But there was a guy across the bench that his job was industrial espionage. And I glommed onto this person because what he was doing was just fascinated. So he became sort of my mentor in analytical chemistry, just because I was so fascinated with what he was doing. And so sometimes when you find those commonalities, you kind of need to express your interest in furthering the relationship or the information sharing that may build to a mentoring relationship. You have to be willing to realize that it is not necessarily your direct supervisor or your PI for sure.
Dave, Denise, do either of you have anything to add to this question?
Not really. I think some of it comes
not at this time.
Honestly, I think everybody can be a mentor. There are degrees. We've talked about informal mentoring, and then there have been the crown of mentoring. I think it's a continuum, though, right? We can all learn from everyone around us. Now, whether you have levels of trust with the individuals that you're getting information from is obviously different, but I just worry if you worry too much about having a mentor, then you might lose the fact that you can learn from 20 people all around you. You don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be one.
That's exactly right. I was getting ready to pick on the next person in the chat, and Stacy kind of pointed this out too about, can you have only one mentor? Should you have multiple mentors? I think that you're getting ready to lead into the benefits of this. I think this is a really big limitation I've had with the mentorship program that we started here is I'm ready to transition. You know, we've run our first year, we're getting ready to start our second year of the program. I asked the student, is it okay if I match you with another person? And they're like, no, I like this mentor. I don't want another one. And I'm like, it's okay to have more than one. So does anyone want to comment on that?
I agree on that, actually.
You have to work with difficult people.
I think that and scientists tend to be maybe the stereotype, more reserved, and then, yeah, I'm uncomfortable with you. I don't want to start over with somewhere else. But your career goes through evolutions and chapters, and you have to constantly, I think every year you reevaluate the people that you meet with, and then you should reevaluate. Okay, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. You know, this is what I used to tell my children. So you keep that circle. Okay, it should be getting bigger because your network is getting bigger. But reevaluate. Okay, I just added this particular person. I actually introduced myself to individuals that I was impressed with. I heard a talk. I introduced myself to them and say, I love what you said. Do you want to go ahead and start? Would you want to meet for lunch? And then that becomes a regular. And then this person ends up being your mentor as well. And I think at some point we need to go from mentor to sponsor, what that transition means, right? And which is the title of the session. But you do need to have constantly be working on your network, and then who are you mentoring and who are you being mentored by? That's a constant curation, I think, that you need to do in your career, just as important as your projects or your technical skills. Is just one more item, right, of your career map.
Yeah, I want to table that nurture your network thing. I want to get back to that. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say on multiple mentors?
This is Denise. So I believe that it's good to have multiple mentors because everybody, you know, maybe didn't grow up in the same neighborhood, grow up in same backgrounds. And so there's good in getting different perspectives from different people and then making your own decisions on what's best for you. So I definitely advocate to be open to that so that you could analyze different things from different sources.
Yeah, that's excellent. So does anyone else want to touch on this subject before we transition? Okay. So you mentioned something about nurturing the network. This is something that was very important when I did my internship, is everyone's like, you have to network. And so when I first started, I just started making meetings with every single person I could think of. And it was really easy because I could just ask, you know, people kind of like some generic kinds of questions. And then, of course, as my internship progressed, I started meeting with the same people, some of which, you know, they scheduled with me or whatnot. And then I started having really hard times and I'd come into the meeting and they'd be like, well, what can I do for you? And I realized kind of that I was just scheduling meetings to make it look like I was networking, I guess. And I didn't always have something that was meaningful. And I think that is something that students don't understand, is that every networking, every meeting you have should have some sort of intention. And so can you guys kind of talk about that? How can we make sure we're getting the most out of our meetings and making sure that we're effectively nurturing these relationships and we're not just having these generic networking labeled meetings?
I'll take that one. So one of the things that I typically do when I mentor is to have a heart-to-heart with my mentee on what really we are trying to accomplish towards, you know, the end of this. And then I do my own homework to provide some research or some articles along the way that we can have talking points when we have these meetings, so that we have a very good discussion and it's just not what I call checking the box type of chats. So I try to make them meaningful as possible so that we could challenge the perspectives of maybe what was read or what was reviewed, and see if we have alignment or disagreements, and which is fine, but that's part of the discussion and the discovery of the mentee and the mentor.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's so important. And like you said, checking boxes can be very easy to do. I'll schedule a meeting with my mentor. That way, they saw my face, and I think that's really important. Does anyone else have something they want to say about that?
Also, go ahead, Barbara. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, because a lot of the mentoring that I do is informal, and they're with undergraduate students. They come to visit me or they pop in during my office hours, and I'm not really sure what they want. And what my ask of mentees is, if there's something you have it on your mind, to speak it. Otherwise, it's possible. What I've started doing after a very long, very pointless visit, as we're wrapping up, I say, did we talk about the things you intended to talk about? Because sometimes they just don't have the, I guess, conversational skill to steer things to where they want. So I encourage mentees to sort of be clear on what your ask is, and maybe it's just to hang out, but I think usually there's some reason for a visit. I'd like to know what it is.
Well, I think there's an important point to that. A lot of the questions I get from mentees is, well, who am I to ask something of that person? Who am I to ask something that they're a vice president, they're a senior director? Like, what are they getting from me? And so what advice would you have for students when you want to help and you're like, just ask and I'll do what I can? Like, what can you tell them so they maybe feel better about whatever they feel this big ask is?
So I would say, I take that one. So, and I think Christine, you and I talked about it a little bit about it. Again, the mentors, and they mentioned this, we get just as much as the relationship as the mentees do. So go knowing that your time is just as valuable as the mentor. So there's got to be some sort of a connection between you and the mentor. So again, you don't need to have all your ducks in a row. And what Barbara just said about making sure that, okay, I'm coming to you because I'm lost and I'm looking for somebody. There's this interactive map right now that I think Stacy Lowery Bretts, she actually posted this, and I just took a look at it. She gave us the link. It's fantastic because it shows the mentoring as you could be substantive feedback, access to opportunities, accountability, professional development, or just emotional support. So what are you looking in this relationship? You're coming to me because I'm a senior director and I know about an area and you're curious about the area, or you're looking for opportunities, or you're looking for somebody that has done the drill before you that can share with you some pointers. So there's got to be some sort of way that you point to your mentor in the right direction, right? But at the same time, you need to get the feeling that this mentor is there. I learned from my mentees about their area, about data. When I get 3 or 4 people asking me the same question, that's an education for me to be a better mentor. So I'm actually benefiting from that hour just as much as they are, if not more, right? So if you get the feeling that that person is checking the box or not really invested in the relationship or not really that interested in you, don't go back and meet with that person again. So there's got to be that kind of back and forth. I learned from every single one of my mentees. If it's something about, what makes the relationship work, if I actually am constantly, it's almost kind of like artificial intelligence where you're feeding the model and then the model gets better and better and better. So I feed from those interactions in my ability to get better. But again, you need to point your mentor in the right direction on what you want, what you expect this person to do. If it is just emotional support, so be it. There's nothing wrong. I mean, we all need emotional support. We all need that. This, for me, I mean, particularly my story as an immigrant to this country, coming into graduate school, coming to pharma, in a very, very clueless fashion. sharing my story with you is going to make you feel that you are more valuable than you thought you were, that's fantastic. It could be that, you know, that I have some other thing that this person is a completely different from me. They don't want to become me, but I know something they don't know, and that's also possible. So I think that this, I recommend to everybody this map that Stacy posted to the chat as a great tool to get started thinking about this. But ultimately, do as a student, realize that you are just as valuable as and very, very leaders that I admire very, very much in the company. The common line that I have seen between these individuals is that they always respect everybody regardless of level. The truly, truly intelligent people and the truly incredible leaders that I have admired at Lilly had time for a person that was just coming out of the school just as much as they did for the CEO. And this is a sign of intelligence because they really do know that everybody has importance. You'll see that in truly remarkable professionals, that they know that every undergraduate is valuable. So I hope that this serves to increase the confidence of every single person knocking on the door, or somebody that they see as very high and mighty. Every single one of us have something to contribute. What is that you are contributing to the relationship?
Yeah, I think you said a lot of good things, Dave. Maybe you can go from the perspective of someone. You said you've had a lot of mentors. I'm sure some of them have been very important. I'm sure some of them you've initiated on your own. What gives you the confidence to ask something of someone so important?
Well, I've led a pretty privileged life, so that makes life easy. But you know, that's a really hard question, because it does come down so much to where is that fear coming from, right? That fear can be different from different people. And so it's hard to give one specific answer. Personally, I come back to even the most successful people are successful for reasons other than themselves. And I know that I've said that many times, but that's a through line to how I think about it. The other thing being that, you know, I can't speak to how it works other places, but hopefully the potential mentors have chosen to take part in that program. They are where they are because they want in some fashion to mentor and help people along. So obviously that's not always going to be the case, but I certainly hope it's usually the case that those people want to help you.
Yeah, I feel like I need like a quote board for that. Even the most successful people are successful due to other people than themselves. It's like my new inspiring quote. I'm going to put them above my desk. I really like that. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about this topic? Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Can you speak towards dealing with affinity bias in your mentoring network? How do you recognize it? How do you address it? How do you minimize it?
Can you define that bias? Christine, what did you mean? What is that bias?
Yeah, Anne, do you mind doing that for us? What you're specifically meaning by affinity bias? Give her a minute, she's got to type.
I think affinity bias means your tendency to associate with the people you feel an affinity with. And not associate with people that you don't feel an affinity with. And I think we can take that affinity bias beyond just the common ground that we're talking about finding, and stretched out to talking about ethnic and racial affinity bias as well as economic bias. Let's just contrast the traditional college student, the four-year college student, with the commuter college student that takes 6 to 8 years to work their way through college and with mediocre grades. We already have two separate kinds of students. One is fully supported at home and the other is struggling. They're all smart. but their grades don't look like it. And so as an instructor, you feel like the ones with the bad grades aren't trying, so you don't want to give them attention, and you want to give these little bright shining stars lots of attention. So that would be like a really natural affinity bias that we might all see, in undergraduate education. And so I, for one, educated myself on what was going on with these students, and sort of realized that there has to be some compassion and empathy, that everybody's path is different and they may have similar goals. And so what I have done to overcome affinity bias is to be cognizant of those differences and help people find ways to leverage those differences to success. So I think this is what Anne is talking about, is the tendency for people to gravitate towards people like themselves and possibly not be interested in mentoring people who are not like themselves.
Yes, she has confirmed that everything you said is exactly right.
So thank you so much for the explanation. I think I might have intuitively avoided that bias without really knowing, how to put it into words. But I guess for me in hiring, when we run a very successful recruiting program, and that looks far and wide at talent, and I guess my initial intuition was that we could not continue to hire people from Harvard alone, because otherwise we're going to get the same solutions and the same thinking over and over and again, right? And Eli Lilly and company traditionally had recruiting grounds, recruiting inputs that were very much limited. So when we set up our program, we had this variety of inputs, and we had students coming from the Harvards and the MITs of the world, but also some sort of community colleges, or maybe the input was a community program that Lilly participated in, where the students were like what Barbara just described, vastly different. So I guess what I decided that we needed to do was have some sort of evaluation dimensions that were common to every individual, regardless of the situation. So we came up with this, and actually very happily so, it is very much more now what is being used. So first of all, we don't look at the GPA, we don't look at grades as much as learning agility, demonstration of learning agility, motivational fit, and work ethic. Because anybody can demonstrate work ethic. Even if your job has been Walmart, you can tell me, what is your boss at Walmart telling me about you, right? I'm trying to tease out. Obviously, we want students and we want scientists that have a foundational, but I can always teach you skills. I cannot teach you to be driven. I cannot teach you to be responsive. I cannot teach you to have work ethic. So what we try to do is look at dimensions that are universal. So motivational fit is how much do you want to be here? And a 4.0 may or may not tell me that. Right, probably is an indication. A student with very good grades is an indication, but not necessarily the whole truth. Learning agility, everyone can, this whole idea of the most improved. Who is the most improved student that I put him in the right environment and shows me that steep curve of learning and you are a good scientist, not because of what you know, but what you can learn and how quickly can you learn it. So we've tried to move away from some of those more traditional ways of identifying talent to these more universal dimensions that demonstrate who you are, as opposed to, and this is more a measure of the true potential of a human. What you are talking about resonates very much with me, because I come from a very humble background, and one of the most intelligent human beings I've ever been around was my mother, who never went to school ever a day in her entire life. I actually tutored my mom through her GED when she was in her 40s, and my grandmother never learned to read or write. So that, for me, that perspective, my mom is actually smarter than many PhDs I've been around in my entire life. So differentiating education and credentials and what you have been able to achieve because of your environment, from what you really truly bring to the table, which for a scientist is that curiosity, that learning agility. So I try, I guess maybe intuitively, I try to remove some of those biases. What we have been able to demonstrate is that method actually helps us and it works in the field. So we're actually writing a white paper on that topic, which hopefully, as society changes more and more towards some of those dimensions, we'll see less and less of those biases in the workplace and in the academia, et cetera.
Yeah, perhaps to some extent though, you know, you're talking about picking these people who are more or less underdogs. I think in some ways that's a bit of an affinity bias too. That's one that I actually think that I benefit from a lot, is I am kind of that person that comes in and you're like, oh geez, that girl is kind of driving the struggle bus today. And then, you know, by the end, you got people that see that I'm willing to work and the opportunities come, and I'm not always excelling at it maybe, but they recognize my willingness to work hard at it. And so I guess in some ways people really do like the underdogs of the group, and they're more willing to take chances on them because they recognize and they see that in themselves. I know that's how I've gotten mentors as well, as they're like, I see so much of my mistakes in you.
I mean, human bias is a human trait. Our brains do not work without bias. I read on bias constantly, data bias, you know, interpretation biases, etc. And I think what Barbara was saying about awareness, all of us in our professional lives that we're trying to be don't let those biases cripple you, but know that they exist. I mean, and you have to constantly study and be aware.
Does anybody else want to comment on the affinity bias question? Okay, I think we have time for a few more. So this one says that there seems to be some overlap between informational interviews and initiating mentorship relationships. Do you feel that that's true?
Informational interviews meaning what you do in a kind of in a meet and greet, correct?
Yeah, so they're saying as a mentee and trying to create your own career, you can ask a lot of different people about what they do and how they've gotten to where they are. But that doesn't necessarily make them a mentor. And so when does that...
I mean, to me, a mentor comes with is a long-term relationship. So you can establish that meet and greet, that informational interview, call it whatever, but the mentorship develops over time because there's an investment in both parts. So I guess, you know, when we establish our programs, we give everybody, we set up the first interview, I guess the informational interview, the first meet and greet, but then the onus is on the mentee to continue and say, hey, can I see you again? This has been because I don't think any mentor is arrogant enough to say, oh, you're going to meet with me every month. I usually wait. Hey, did you think that this conversation was valuable? If so, that person is you as a student, you as an employee, you as the underdog. It's kind of the onus is of you to knock again on that door and say, can I do this again? And I think that every single one of us needs to take charge of that piece.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think a lot of the things that hold young people back in particular is the lack of initiative on that, you know, for whatever reason, fear or lack of understanding. So I think that that's a great point. I know we've got only a few minutes left and we haven't even talked about sponsorship. And I know it was one of the big things here. So can you guys, I guess, more or less define the differences between these champions, sponsors, mentors, and then talk about what would make a good person for each of those roles? And maybe we can, Denise, you want to start with this one, or you can pick any of those?
I think Denise, you're in mute. Dave, I guess Dave is not on mute. Why doesn't Dave go?
Dave, you want to tackle one of those?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not entirely familiar with the specific terms. To me, it seems like just climbing that mountain of investment, right? As the individuals become more invested in the relationship, they're willing to do more and more. You know, we become, you know, love is the outcome of effort, And so, you know, I think
yes.
like as you go along, I think that just technically happens. And like I said before, I wouldn't worry too much about specifically what to call it. I would more worry about what everybody's getting out of it.
Well, I think the sponsor is willing to speak for you when you're not in the room. So the mentor and you gotta, it's a difficult transition because you almost have to ask your mentor, will you be willing to speak for me? To know that that person is your sponsor. Sometimes they will, I mean, I try to let my mentees know when I'm ready to sponsor them versus not. Because a lot of it is that, yeah, that love grows with the effort, but if I'm gonna put my name on the line and speak for someone and sponsor somebody actively, I'm putting my credibility on the line too. So I'm willing to mentor you and spend time with you, but when I'm starting to sponsor somebody, I'm going that extra step of speaking for them and saying, putting your name down for opportunities, etc. So I think you go from kind of that, yeah, the stakes go up. It is a fair thing to ask, are you willing to sponsor me? Once you, it's like a sponsor, all mentors, I mean, some mentors are sponsors and most sponsors should be at least some level of mentors, but not the other way around, right? Because that sponsorship signifies that that person speaks for you when you're not there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it looks like Julian actually defined each of these and they're very thorough. So thank you for doing that, Julian.